Distinguished guests, so for our next topic highlight, we will start in a few minutes. Let's talk about sustaining communities, aging, our elders, health, and society. So today, that we got it only from our key person that he will be here to give you about the deep down detail. Right now, distinguished guests, if all of you ready, so please give a round of applause for welcome Associate Professor Dr. Mark Stephan Felix, Faculty of Social Science and Humanities, Mahidol University on the stage. Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be here. I hope you can hear me clearly. To our audience who's online, welcome. If you're just joining us here at the Sustainability Expo at the Queen Sirikit National Convention Center in Bangkok, Thailand. As our lovely MC has said, my name is Mark Felix, and I am an associate professor at Mahidol University. I am part of the Department of Society and Health in the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities. So when I was first invited to do this, and I was told that it's an expo on sustainability, I thought to myself, how can we as a society understand that sustainability is huge and very far-reaching? And I thought that one of the phenomenon that the world is actually undergoing right now is the phenomenon of an aging population. So I am going to gear today's presentation to look at how we can make our world, right, the society that we live in, more sustainable in terms of caring for our elders as they age, to take care of ourselves as we give help to our elders, and most of all, how we can help each other to face this new phenomenon. And I am coming to this topic from the angle of how we can make the help we are giving them sustainable. So, usually when we talk about sustainability, we think of two things. We think of the environment and we think about the economy. Now, both of these things are very important because it is through the environment and a clean environment that society can survive and thrive. And it is also with an economy that is growing, vibrant, and healthy that we can actually continue to have the financial means to give the proper care and provide good health services to our elders. So I'd like to invite all of you, ladies and gentlemen, here this evening, and also our dear guests online, to spread your view of sustainability a little wider beyond just the environment and the economy. All of the efforts we are making in terms of preserving and taking care of our environment, and all of the efforts that governments worldwide are making to sustain economies are very important. But that's not the only part, I think, for a sustainable future. Because to me, we might have a better environment and we might have a better economy, but if we're not taking care of each other, there's no point to have a better economy or to have a better environment. So, with this in mind, we have as a definition or two definitions of sustainability, which means one, maintaining something at a particular level, and number two, not depleting the natural resources that we have. Before I go any further in my presentation, I'd just like to say that for my presentation, when I say maintaining something at a particular level, I mean maintaining the quality of life for people at a certain level, an acceptable level. If not a fantastic level, at the very least, an acceptable level. When I talk about natural resources, I am going beyond just water, food, and clothing or housing. I am talking about people, and people in terms of their knowledge, their skills, their talent, and their capability to provide care and good health care to our elders in our society. I think for all of us, if at my age, I'm already middle-aged, but if at my age, my parents are still alive, I consider myself very lucky, right? But the concern is on me and my siblings on how to provide the best healthcare possible. So that means making sure that my siblings and I are also taken care of. And we need to extend that idea and that thought to realizing that every one of us is also a natural resource in this fight for sustainability. So, what is happening in the world today? I'm going to focus on an aging population that is 60 years of age and above. And I am only taking 60 years of age because in many societies in Southeast Asia, 60 is considered old age. And the only reason we have that is because 60 is the age when most of us will retire. Other societies have the age of 65 and above as old age. Now, some scholars in my field believe that if a person grew up and lives in a developed nation, right, old age does not begin until 65. But if you were born and you have grown up in a developing economy, a person can be considered old at the age of 50. Now, why is that? There are several factors. First factor is, in a developed economy, there are far more and far better medical resources. There is hardly the issue of food scarcity. They have a food system and a health system that's already been set up to support society. But in developing economies and developing nations, not everyone has that. They might have a good source of food, but it is not necessarily sufficient to keep every single member of society in a good state of health. But for the purposes of this evening's talk, I'm going to go with 60 years of age, okay? That's going to be the general view. We are having a huge change in societal aging. Now, 5 years ago, there were already 1 billion people over the age of 60. Then that number has grown exponentially. In ASEAN, 7.5% of the population is already considered elderly. Please think of the implications of this. 7.5% of the population is no longer economically viable. They cannot be taxed. Instead, they require good taxes in order to support the health system, such as hospitals, doctors, nurses, geriatricians, etc., to keep them in a good state of health. In Thailand alone, right now, there are 17 million persons over the age of 60. So if we go with a rough number of 71 million people in Thailand alone, 17 million people are already considered no longer economically viable. They are considered outside of the work market. And in some cases, very sadly, they might be considered an economic burden because they can no longer pay taxes, they can no longer support the economy. They've reached a stage where they are just taking from the economy. Okay? Here's the point. This is a picture that we have today. In a few months, it's going to be 2025. That number is going to go up. And that number is going to go up exponentially simply because medical technology has made it possible for people to live longer, and fewer people are having children. And the people who are having children limit themselves to one child, maybe two. But over time, over a period of time, if we project 50 years into the future, okay, there might come a time when a couple, let's say a husband and a wife, or a husband and a husband, or a wife and a wife, are going to have to be responsible for at least one child, right, and two sets of parents. And then one day that grandchild is going to reach the stage where they're going to have to take care of everyone else that's older in age. So as a society, with this kind of a phenomenon possibly happening to us faster than we expect, how on earth do we manage it? There are different considerations that we need to look at in terms of preparation for this change in the demographic profile, okay? We need to look at health, and I'll go more into that in a second. But we also need to look at housing. Is the housing for our older adults, is it safe? Is it sufficient? Is it clean? Is it secure? Can we change the housing that we have for them to support their needs, right? I'm not going to lie about it. I'm not so young anymore, right? There was a time when I was okay to use, let's say, for example, the bathroom, right? And I didn't need any help to get myself up. Now, I need a little bar handle, right? And as we get older, we need more and more and more of that. So in terms of housing, is that possible, right? We need to talk about inclusiveness and being prepared to include our elderly members of society in society still. It's not a matter of just saying, keep our elders at home. When somebody gets married, then we take them out. We cannot do that anymore. How do we keep our elders as a vital part of our society? We need to look also at assisted living, okay? When we get older, and this happens to everyone, we will need more help, even if it's something as simple as cooking, cleaning, doing the laundry, right? Somebody just to make sure that we take our medicine on time. So in terms of assisted living, we need to consider if we are prepared for it. And this is something I think we often overlook. In any society, when there's a growing phenomenon, we tend to focus only on that population, right? But I would argue that we also need to look at the kinds of resources available to give the caregivers of our older adults. Do we have enough resources in terms of time, money, knowledge, skill building, capacity building to give to people who are taking care of their mothers, their fathers, grandparents? Are we ready? Sometimes it need not be an immediate family member. Sometimes it could just even be a neighbor or a friend, someone we've known for a long time, how do we go about it? And we also need to think about comprehensive financial resources which give an assured quality of life. It's not enough to just give a handout once a year. I'm from Malaysia, and then once a year, the government gives elderly people a small bit of money. And I look at it and I go, that's not enough. Once a year, you give them, I think the equivalent here is about 3,000 baht. How is 3,000 baht enough for an entire year for an older person to survive? It's not enough. So we also need to look at the financial resources which are available. Now, all of these are important, but because my area is society and health, my area of specialization, and one of my areas of research is the aging population, I am going to focus on the health of the elderly. We like to think that, well, in Asian society, it is our culture, it is our manners, our good manners, and it is our duty to take care of our elders. And I think all of us believe that. But we also need to think slightly ahead and stop thinking that every elderly person or older adult is exactly the same. When young adults at the age of maybe 23 go into the workforce, you are so different. Every single one of you, so different. Right? Why is it that when people become 60 or 65 years old, we think they're all the same? Right? Our elders do not lose their personality, their characters when they age. Their needs do not change. They might have individual needs. They might have individual likes and dislikes, right? They might have different health problems, right? We cannot assume that everyone's grandmother is happy to have dinner at 5 o'clock, and then from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, they turn on Netflix and they watch a Korean drama. Everybody is different. So we need to look at two things. First of all, we are going to look at health from a physical standpoint, okay? Now, older adults have different health needs from other age groups, simply because certain illnesses and certain diseases only happen with age. For example, arthritis, rheumatism, right? Spinal degeneration. These only happen to older people, right? There is also, they have other health needs where they might have osteoporosis. So their needs for medication, for treatment, for caregiving are different from young people. Well, maybe our two young people, they're different from their health needs. Older adults also face different health risks from other age groups. Now, studies have found that older adults have got a higher incidence of stroke, falls, cracked bones. They have a higher incidence of mental issues such as dementia and all the different kinds of dementia like aphasia and Alzheimer's. Older adults are also more susceptible to non-communicable diseases such as stroke and sarcopenic obesity. This might be new to some of you, the whole sarcopenic obesity thing. Sarcopenia is when an elderly person loses muscles in their body, right? And obesity, of course, is putting on weight. So when you combine the two, you've got older adults who are losing mobility and control of their bodies, but they are also putting on weight, which puts them at risk of diabetes. Right? We like to think of our grandparents, oh, look, there's a joke back home. If a person becomes fat, they don't say you're fat. They say you have become prosperous and lucky. Right? Oh, you're so lucky, you're so fat. But from a health standpoint, it may not be such a good thing. We also need to face the fact that older adults are more prone to injuries sustained from falls, right? Due to lack of muscle strength and balance. It's not just a matter of losing the ability to move, but they have to be able to balance themselves. They could be sitting down and they could be losing their balance. We also need to look at health from a mental health standpoint, right? For older adults, life changes can be very, very harsh. One of the changes could lead to things like depression, and depression is a very real thing for older adults. They might actually lose people in their lives and they become depressed. It has also been found that for men, all the men in the room and online, when we men retire, if we don't find something fun to do immediately, depression sets in. Because we have been busy and focused on our careers for so long that once we have nothing to do, we become sad. The sadness leads to depression. Okay? For the older adults, dementia is something very real, right? They might forget, it might be something really small at first. They might forget where they put their glasses, yeah? But then it can become very serious where they forget who their children are. They might forget where they live. They might forget their families, right? They might have flashbacks to the past. And I think the one thing that we also need to be prepared when we are getting ready to deal, excuse me, with this onslaught from the aging population is loneliness. Okay? This is loneliness due to loss of spouses, right? Ladies, I hate to be the one to tell you, but ladies have a longer life expectancy than men. This is proven statistically. It's because men, we do silly things like we smoke, we drink, we ride our motorcycles, and we think that this is some Olympic sport, right? And we do things that put our health in danger, such as not going to the doctor regularly for our checkups. This is where the ladies are much better than us. Ladies will go for their annual checkups. They will go to their OBGYN. They will have everything checked out, and they do not do silly things like riding motorcycles at 1 o'clock in the morning thinking that we're still 16 years old. Okay? But so that's the fun side, or the funny side. The not so nice side is because men, we are more likely to die earlier than women. So for women, when they lose a spouse, right, loneliness becomes a really big issue. And it can become a bigger issue if younger families move, or they lose younger families due to migration, right? Many young people will choose to go to other countries to work, right? Like I have. I've chosen to come to Thailand to work. Or in a bigger country like Thailand, right? A child might grow up in a place like Chiang Mai or Chiang Rai, but they might choose to come to Bangkok to build a career. So for these elders, they lose that immediate support and they feel lonely. As people age, they also lose their social networks and or their social connections. This could be due to death, this could be due to illness, this could be due to movement, or simply because they're not so strong enough anymore to transport themselves around to actually seek out these social connections that they need. Okay? Now, immediately when I think of this, I think of one of my grandmothers. She loved to play mahjong. She loved it. And whenever she wanted to play mahjong, she would go to my auntie's house, and I had to be her driver. I was her chauffeur, right? It was like, I got to drive her again. But these social connections were important to her. So, when we look at the physical aspect and the mental health aspect, physical health and mental health aspects, we need to realize that health is not just a one-sided thing. And we should not have to wait until one of our elderly persons in our lives or anyone in our society becomes so severely ill before we take any kind of action. In the preparation process for society to create more sustainability to take care of our elders, we need to be cognizant, or we need to recognize that there is a heterogeneity of older adults. They are so different. For example, their illnesses, like I said earlier, could be very different. Their comorbidities could be physical and mental. For example, a morbidity means it's a disease that is ultimately going to lead to a terminal illness and death, right? What if a person, an elderly person, has got cancer and dementia? How do we manage that? What if they have type 2 mature onset diabetes and they have loneliness? Or sometimes, what if they have cancer and diabetes at the same time? Or what if they have depression and Alzheimer's at the same time? No older people have the exact same disease at the same time. So we need to be prepared to be able to manage these comorbidities, whether it's physical, mental, or a combination of both at the same time, right? Some health conditions will advance. I'm trying to be positive here by saying advance, but actually what I mean is deteriorate, right? Mental faculties, cognitive function will deteriorate. Loss of mobility will continue until it's really bad. We need to look at the development of new health conditions, right? If a person has a stroke, one of the things that can happen from sitting around too long is bed sores. And if they have a stroke for too long, we are also looking at loss of muscle mass, sarcopenia. And if they have a stroke and they are bedridden for too long, they could lose any kind of mental function, and they could lose their will to live. So not all older adults have the same combination of health conditions. Therefore, the approach that we should have to be a society where we can sustain a good and high quality of life for our elders is to have a multi-pronged approach and for it to be multi-cognizant. We need to prepare ourselves with the necessary knowledge of how to manage all of this. Living arrangements. Now, we like to think that grandma and grandpa, or our parents, will live together happily for the rest of their lives. And if God, Lord Buddha, is kind, they will die at the same time, and we don't have to worry about it. But that is not the way life works. So every single older adult will have different living arrangements, okay? Some elderly people live with a spouse or a partner, right? Some live with a spouse or partner. Children and grandchildren, that better be a big house. That really better be a big house. They might be widowed or single, living with a child, children, grandchild or grandchildren, and maybe their son or their daughter-in-law. They might be widowed or single and living alone. They might be widowed or single and living in a community setting. I like the language now, community dwelling. When I was younger, we just called it old folks' home. And that was it. I used to go to the old folks' home once a year as a charity thing when I was in school. It was the most sad and depressing place ever, right? Old people in their beds, no one to talk to. They cannot decide what they want to eat. They cannot decide when they want to eat. They can't decide if they want to go out or not. They cannot change the channel on the TV. Please bear in mind, at that point, there were only 3 channels. No Netflix, right? No Netflix packages. And their lives became monotonous. So, living in a community setting may not necessarily be the best thing. There could be, with all these different living arrangements, right? As a society, it will require different preparations in the context of health. It's not only about giving our elders choices, but we need to be ready for what they want. We should be able to ask them, what kind of living arrangement do you want, right? Whether it's formal or informal caregiving. When we say formal caregiving, we mean nurses there the whole time, yeah? Or nurses coming in once a week or once a day. Informal caregivers are usually the children, the grandchildren, right? Or maybe members of a community. And we also need to prepare for the training and education of informal caregivers, okay? If, let's say, one day, right, and this actually happened to me, right? My grandmother had a stroke, and suddenly I had to learn how to pick her up without hurting my own back, right? I had to learn how to make food at such a consistency so it could be fed into a tube that went into her nose and down her throat. It's called, that tube is called a Rouse tube, right? And I had to learn that from the nurses who were taking care of my grandmother. I was lucky that I could learn from the nurses. Not everybody might have that opportunity to learn. So as a society, excuse me, there's water back here. As a society, how can we prepare members of our community? I hope the microphone doesn't catch this. How do we as a society prepare to do this, right? And how do we get the cooperation of family members to deal with the different living arrangements that are possible as society changes and our aging population grows? We need to understand that our elders, just because they are retired, it doesn't mean that they are useless at all. Our elders have different vocational backgrounds, professional backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. How can we as a society make their lives more sustainable by leveraging their knowledge, their skills, their education, their capacities to still be productive members of society? We also need to understand that our elders have different financial standings, okay? Now, I'm talking about a fixed income here, right? I'm not I'm not an economist, I'm not a financial planner, but I do know that elderly people, once they stop working, their income stops. And they have to be prepared about how to manage their finances right up to the end. And these could be pensioners, right? People who are getting a pension from the government, right? And the pension could be very high, to average, or too low. Whether they have sufficient savings and investments, or maybe they have insufficient savings and they have insufficient investments. How are they supposed to manage their finances? And we are looking then, also when we look at financial standings, when a person turns 60 or 65, do they become high dependents? Do they then turn to their children and their grandchildren and say, remember when you were 5 years old and you wanted your Barbie doll and I bought you your Barbie doll and you were so happy? Well, that's fantastic. Now I'm 70 years old. Take care of me. I have no money. Right? There could be older adults that fall into that category, and there are some older adults, some elders, who hit 65 and 70, and they still need to keep working. They need to keep working, maybe not in their fields, right? If they are lucky, they are very well educated, they are lawyers. When they retire, they can continue practicing law on the side. But if they're not well educated, they didn't have good paying jobs, after the age of 65, they might have to go, I don't know, work at McDonald's, Tops, and I don't know in Thailand what the policy is about hiring someone over the age of 65. So the bottom line is this. Any kind of competency, skill, and financial standing affects the access to health. Whether it's hospitals, pharmacies, doctors, physiotherapists, right? Health insurance, the ability to pay for aftercare for any surgical procedure, for example, physiotherapy, and considerations of any kind of health-related decisions. And this is a reality. It's already a reality now. What I'm saying is this reality is going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as the number of aging members of our population continue to grow, right? So we as a society have to start now to catch up with the present phenomenon of aging, right? We need to start questioning, do we have enough medical facilities? Do we have enough medical personnel who are trained, capable, ready, and willing to serve a growing aging population? Do we have enough, community-based educational activities to educate members of the community like children, grandchildren, neighbors, to actually provide good health care for someone, an elderly person, when they hit 75, 80, 85. So how do we prepare for all of this? Now, some of the ideas I'm going to share, I have to say, these are my own ideas. I don't think Mahidol University endorses this. These are my own ideas, right? But some of the ideas I had are this. In terms of medical facilities, society can create sustainability for the growing aging population by having designated geriatric wards. These are wards that are meant only for elderly persons with very specific health needs, right? Thankfully, I see some of you out there nodding. Thankfully, yeah, thank you so much, right? We need to prepare these geriatric wards because, like I said earlier, elderly people of a certain age, their health needs are so different from someone who's 21 and young and energetic and still beautiful and still has all their hair, right? For someone who is in their 80s, their health needs are different. The moment we have geriatric wards, the wards would also include things like medical equipment that is very specific to the needs of members of the elderly population. Thank you so much for coming, ขอบคุณนะครับ right? It is not enough to just say a hospital. We need to have a specified geriatric ward. We also need to have nursing homes for older adults. And by nursing homes, I don't mean just a place. I mean a home. Not a house, a home. A house to me is just a building. A home is some place where you feel safe, you feel secure, you can do whatever you want. It's your home. And it must give our elders that sense of happiness and that sense of security. We need to be prepared with more physiotherapy facilities. The most common physical ailment, I would say, among the older adults, when they fall down and they break a hip, are we prepared for that? When they have a stroke, do we have the physical therapy set up for them to actually rehabilitate themselves so that they can gain some control over their lives? We need to be prepared in terms of medical personnel, okay? We need highly qualified geriatricians. In my home country of Malaysia, I recently read a report that a very, very small percentage of doctors in training, right, trainee doctors, are willing to become geriatricians. Can you guess why? Can anybody guess why? No? The reason is the pay is very low. The pay is low. When you compare a geriatrician to a heart surgeon or a neurosurgeon, they get paid more money. But while I understand the allure of having a comfortable life, right, for the elderly persons in our society, right, they're going to need very specific types of medical care. And we definitely need to encourage more young people to go into geriatrics. We need to make sure that the young people who do become geriatricians are well compensated. They are well taken care of, right? We also need geriatric nurses, right? One of my friends recently left his job and he's gone back to school to become a nurse. And he asked me, Pima Kap, what kind of nurse should I be? Should I become an ICU nurse? Should I become a surgical nurse? I said, go become a geriatric nurse. You will be in demand in about 20 years' time. Even less, maybe even 5 years, you will be in demand. Because it takes a very specific and special set of skills to take care of an elderly person. Not everyone has that ability, okay? So in terms of educational activities, this is where those of us who are too old to change careers, sorry, I'm too old to become a geriatric nurse right now, I just cannot. If you ask me to study biology one more time, I'll say sorry, no thank you, okay? But what can we, the non-medical side of society, actually do? We can help with assisted living. So we could learn caregiving activities and we could teach caregiving activities to the other caregivers. This is something I love, I really, really love and respect about Thailand. You have the province, then you have the district, and then you have the sub-district. And whenever the province decides on an initiative, it flows down right to the smallest communities. A year ago, I finished a research in Klong Mahasawat. If you do not know where that is east. On the western side of Bangkok, you pass Bangkok into Nakhon Pathom, then you go north past Klong Yong for 20 minutes, and then you come to Klong Mahasawat, right? And in Klong Mahasawat, the directive right from the top, from the Ministry of Public Health, all the way down, it's trickled down, and they actually have this thing called VSS, voluntary, sorry, I've got it wrong. VHS, voluntary health services, where members of the community, the elderly people themselves, take care of other elderly people. They use phones to keep in touch, and they call, are you feeling okay today? Have you taken your blood pressure medicine? You're not feeling well, let me arrange for a car to take you to the sub-district hospital. If it's very serious, we will take you to the district hospital, right? So we can learn from them, actually. And we can learn things like the important things for nutrition for older adults. We can learn about how to get our elders interested in exercise, right? I'm not going to ask how many people exercise here. I'm not going to ask, right? Even among my own students, my undergraduate students, I ask them, how many of you exercise? And then suddenly the ceiling becomes very pretty and the floor becomes very pretty. They don't want to answer my question, right? But if we can learn exercises that are specific for the elderly population, we can volunteer, we can help, and we can actually give of our time. And if we do that, these activities, including daily activities, can become very sustainable for our growing aging population. Now, we could also have educational activities. And I don't mean for the elders, I mean this for the younger members of our communities and our society, to assist in providing caregiving to the older members of society. It could be things, and this is what I just found out through my research, digital literacy. How to teach a person who is 75 years old how to use their phone to find reliable health information. Many elders, as I found out, are afraid to use a phone because they're afraid of scams. It's very funny. I just checked my phone. While I was up here, I just received a scam call. Can you imagine if I'm afraid of it, someone who is 80 years old must be terrified of getting a scam call. But we, as the younger members of society, can teach them how to use, whether it's a tablet or a phone or a laptop, how to be more digitally literate. We can learn cardiopulmonary resuscitation to help older people who actually start having a heart attack. The only thing I know is this. With an elderly person, you've got to be very careful when you do the presses because they are old, they're osteoporotic. You do it too hard, you could actually cause their entire rib cage and sternum to collapse. But still, CPR can help. We can also learn basic first aid, okay? Like I said, elderly people are prone to falls. We can learn how to pick them up. We can learn how to assess whether we should call the ambulance or just call the neighbor, right? Because when they cook, they're not so steady, they could end up burning themselves. How do we make them more comfortable by telling them, we know first aid and we know how to take care of the burn before we go to see the doctor or before we go to the hospital. So for the younger members of any community or any society, these could be some of the educational activities. And we can have all of these in community spaces, right, for older adults. And when we have these community spaces, older adults can establish and maintain social connections, right? Social connections must never be underestimated in the health and well-being of the older members of our society. I can safely say this, all of us, congratulations, we survived that horrible pandemic, right? We survived that horrible pandemic, but I am so sure if you are like me, after the first month, I couldn't see my friends, I couldn't see my students, I couldn't see my colleagues. I was feeling sad and depressed. I needed that social connection. Imagine it would be 10 times worse if a person was 80 years old, could no longer drive, had no money to go to a restaurant or Starbucks or Amazon coffee, and couldn't make any more social connections. So, in terms of educational activities, it's not only having the activities themselves, but also having a space for our older adults and a place where they feel safe, where they're not going to be judged, where, who knows, if they find themselves, they've been gifted a new shirt or a new dress, it's a place for them to look good and feel happy. Remember, just because they are older adults does not mean they stop being people. They need this kind of social connection, social inclusion. So, I've got 3.5 minutes left, so here are the key points, if I may, ladies and gentlemen. The phenomenon of aging societies is already a reality in Thailand. We cannot run from it. It's already here. The only way we can change it right now is if every single person in the room who is capable of having a baby starts making babies really, really fast. And lots of babies. Lots and lots of babies. If we can, we start cloning them. But we cannot run. Aging societies in Thailand is very real. It's not just something in China, it's not just something in, actually the 3 societies leading for aging populations, South Korea, China, and Japan, right? But that doesn't mean Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, we are exempt. We are all within that aging population now. In order to sustain communities that are cohesive and healthy, it requires recognition that older adults are heterogeneous, and we need now to make custom plans of action to be implemented. It's not enough to just have a plan that sounds good. We need to implement this plan, right? Sustaining the elderly community requires all of us, from the top all the way down, from the top echelons of government, right down to people in villages, people in academia, people in business, young people who are finishing their internships. It requires all of us to give our input, to work together, and to collaborate with all of the members of the community. And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, no one wants to be in pain, no one wants to be unhealthy. So health is an essential part of the efforts for a sustainable future. It's again not only about our environment, it's not only about our economies. It is about making society and the direction that society is moving in have great quality of life for everyone in it, right? So we need to place a priority on the health of our older adults because they are the ones who are now facing that final push before they go on to their next life. We need to be prepared, we need to get ready, as a society, I think with all the innovations, with all the knowledge, with all the wisdom that the Kingdom of Thailand has, we will be able to do something to help our elders and maybe start helping out the neighboring countries of Thailand, just like Malaysia, where I come from, and hopefully we can make the last few years of our older adults, of our elderly's lives, not only healthy, but also one where we give them dignity and also one where they can keep their self-respect. Okay, I've actually got a Q&A, but I've only got 17 seconds left. I'm afraid I won't be able to take any Q&A today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your kind attention. I know it's dinner time, but you've stayed, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much for being here. ขอบคุณมากครับ สวัสดีครับ
Thank you so much. Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Mark Stephan, Felix, Faculty of Social Science and Humanities, Mahidol University, for your time. And you want distinguished guests, so please give a round of applause for one more time.